Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україна! 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 Героям України тричі! Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for coming here today to spread the message of the Ukrainian people to the whole world. Now, before we go any further, we're going to start this rally, as we usually do, with the Ukrainian anthem. Слава Україні! Слава нації! Україна! 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 Героям України тричі! Ворогам України тричі! But friends, once again, the Russian terrorist regime has struck civilians in Ukraine. Today, one of the biggest strikes has happened in Kyiv, and not only in Kyiv, but in many Ukrainian cities. A lot of people died. The destruction is immeasurable. They're still counting the dead right now. We still don't know the full casualty count of this disaster, of this terror act that Russia has committed today, my friends. And this continues to happen. Not too long ago, this happened in Odessa, because the Russians were planning to assassinate Zelensky. And they were fine to kill a whole Greek delegation just to get him. When the Ukrainians strike military targets, the Russians attack civilians. When the Ukrainians cripple the Russian logistics of war, the Russians attack the critical infrastructure for the civilians in Ukraine. Now, my friends, when one side is fighting against the enemy's soldiers and the other side is only attacking the civilians themselves, that's not a war. That's an attempted extermination. And this is what the Russian terrorist regime has been doing ever since the beginning of this war. Ever since the beginning in 2014. They've been attacking civilian targets non-stop, and they've been choosing these civilian targets in particular. The Ukrainians have separated their military targets from the civilian infrastructure. They're far from each other, and the Russians know this. But you know what? It doesn't matter, because they purposefully attack the civilians. They purposefully attack the critical infrastructure, almost as if in an act of revenge for something the Ukrainians did not do in the first place. Because as we know, many Russian cities have almost frozen to death this winter. Because the Russian infrastructure, the infrastructure of this country, that is one of the biggest producers of natural gas, that's one of the biggest producers of oil, of crude oil in the world, one of the biggest energy producers in the world, had some of their cities freezing. That's Russia. That's how they behave, that's how they act. They freeze their own people so that others fear them, as the saying goes. But my friends, this atrocity continues in Ukraine right now as we speak. And something needs to be done about it. Obviously, the air defense that Ukraine has gotten is not enough. The Russian missiles can still overwhelm the air defense systems in Ukraine, at least to an extent. Sure, a lot of their rockets will be knocked down, a lot of these Shahid drones will be knocked down, but some will go through. And every single one of them that goes through brings a cost of blood and innocent lives for the Ukrainian people. That is why Ukraine needs arms, Ukraine needs weapons, Ukraine needs help in order to defend themselves against the Russian terrorist regime, in order to survive and to defend the free world from this expansionistic and genocidal country-sized criminal syndicate. This great Khanate of Moscow, the great kleptocracy with Putin in charge. This needs to stop. And we can stop it together if only we give Ukraine everything that's necessary to finally achieve victory, to finally bring this war to an end. Because as we know, the only way to stop this war is to help Ukraine win. Arm Ukraine as you promised.
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 Fighter jets for Ukraine.
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 Air defense 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 for Ukraine.
We have been talking about this topic so many times in the past. But once again, my friends, we are brought to the same topic, so many times covered, so many times discussed and explained. What does support matter if it's silent? What do the right ideals matter if they are impotent, incapable of changing anything? What do words themselves matter if they are not backed by actions? This question is coming up again now, that the Russians are upping their antics right after the shaming action they've had. And they have brought back Putin to rule them as their great Khan once again. Or rather, Putin has crowned himself as usual. This election for a new Putin was meaningless. And it has proven what everybody already knew. Democracy is dead in Russia. In fact, it's possible that it was never alive in the first place. Russia is an authoritarian regime. Russia is a terrorist regime. And the countries of the free world need to finally recognize this. To finally see who their enemy is. To know their enemy. That is the only way to victory. That is the only way to face that enemy and to have a chance of beating him, of beating Russia. When here in the UK and all over the West, people discuss whether or not giving Ukraine long-range missiles would be a bit too much. In Russia, they're discussing nuking this country altogether, sending one of their Neptune missiles and burying this country underneath a radioactive wave. And this is not uncommon in Russian propaganda. They keep discussing this nonsense left, right and center. All it takes is one look at their propaganda machine and you can see where they stand. You can see this virulent hatred of everything that's Western, their hatred of the very ethnicity of the Anglo-Saxons. They loathe you. They loathe the West. And they keep inculcating this hatred to their people non-stop. They keep preparing their people for new meat waves. Just days ago, Shoigu has declared that it's his plan to create 2 new armies of the Russian Federation. Now here's a $1 million question. What do you think they're going to be doing with these 2 new armies? Oh, are they so scared of NATO and the invasion from Georgia and from Ukraine that they're creating them just to save themselves? My friends, it's time to wake up. If we do not see reality as it is, if we are stubborn to keep our eyes closed, we run the risk of sleeping forever. And that would seem like the plan that the Russian terrorist regime has for the West, to make it sleep forever until it's put down for good. We have a choice to face Russia now that it's weakened, now that it's reeling from this war against the Ukrainian people, or to face them later when these 2 new armies that Shoigu has discussed are ready and armed with the blood money that Russia is earning every single day that goes by. We have that choice, my friends. We have that choice. Not everyone has it. And we need to remember that. There are many people who no longer have that choice because it was taken away from them. Because they did not see the problems outside of their borders as their issues. They thought that the issues of other countries will never come to them. And they have paid the price for that. We have seen this behavior many times. And it's as the saying goes, no fire is too hot until it's your hide that's burning. Everybody has skin in this game, my friends. Everybody. And now that Ukraine is burning, now that Ukraine is getting attacked by the Russian terrorist regime, now that Russia is planning to create whole new armies to go for new conquests, new advances against all of Europe. And this is not something that they are hiding even. They are speaking about it proudly. Today in Kyiv, tomorrow in Warsaw, in a week in Berlin. And then who knows, maybe London in a month, or Washington. They have been speaking about annexing Alaska openly. In fact, there were some pretty fun interactions with some deputies in the United States who spoke about this specific topic. Obviously, a lot of people prefer to simply not take them seriously, because to have to engage in such rhetoric is to acknowledge that it is plausible. And that is terrifying. A lot of self-serving politicians refuse to accept this as a possible reality. But my friends, we need to realize at long last that Russia is not an enemy who's going to be stopped by appeasement. It seems like finally Emmanuel Macron has realized it. He's been finally sending some good messages these days. He's been finally committing to strategic ambiguity, to leave every single option on the table, to not allow the Russian terrorist regime to be at peace and see red lines of the West. Because Russia has no red lines. It's as Putin said, Russia has no borders. It will expand until it is stopped. And it is being stopped now by the Ukrainian people. However, just like we've seen in Avdiivka, No soldier can fight without weapons. Modern wars cannot be waged without ammunition, without the right equipment. Ukraine needs that equipment. That is the only reason why Avdiivka fell. The Ukrainians did not have the right equipment. And as the West bickers and discusses whether or not they should send Ukrainians these missiles essential for the survival of the Ukrainian country, essential for the maintenance of peace in the rest of Europe, as they keep bickering about it, people keep dying. And people continue to keep dying because of the ignorance of people who don't understand that this great peace in the East might come for them next. World, wake up!
World, wake up!